Okay.
Very good. Welcome everybody to our first meeting of February for the Municipality of West Perth Council. So before we get started, I would ask council and staff, if they so wish, that we will take a moment of silent reflection. Okay, good. Thank you. So we do have a fairly busy agenda tonight. We'll try and keep it rolling on. Not sure what our end time is going to be here, but we'll carry on. So the first item on the agenda is the confirmation of the agenda. Would somebody like to move that and second that as well? Moved by Councillor Rose. Do we have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Harold. All those in favor of the agenda? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Does anybody have a conflict of interest with anything on the agenda tonight? Okay, I don't see any hands up. We have a consent agenda here, and there are 6 items on the consent agenda. Is there anything here that anybody would like pulled and discussed separately, or a little more information on? Okay, I don't see any hands going up. So I guess if that's the case, a motion to accept the consent agenda would be in order. Councillor Murray and Councillor Bell. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. And I'm just looking here. We have lost somebody. Dean. Don't see Dean. Okay. We'll carry on. I don't know whether he's lost his signal or what, but we'll keep going here, I think. So the first item on the agenda is a delegation, and we do have the 3 members from the 3 conservation authorities here with us tonight. We have Tracy Annette from Upper Thames. We have Brian Horner from Asabo Bayfield, and we have Phil Beard from Maitland Valley. And they're going to, I was going to call it a team tag, but when there's 3, I guess it's a trio tag. And I'm going to turn it over to you. And I'm going to, I've got an order here. I guess that's the order that I will take. And I have Tracy first, and then Brian, and then Phil, which isn't alphabetical. Other than by the last name. So there's going to be a presentation, and then it'll be kind of like a panel, I guess. And then if there's questions at the end, you can ask, and you can direct it to whoever, whichever conservation authority, whichever person you want to address it to. So it's a trio team group here. So I'm going to start with Tracy, and we'll go from there. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie. I was wondering if Daniel would be able to pull up the presentation, or if you'd rather I share screen, preferably.
You can share screen, Tracy.
Okay, let me just minimize that in the background here. It's always a few things to get set up, so sorry about that. But certainly thank you, Mayor McKenzie, for having us here tonight. And as you mentioned, both Brian and Phil will be joining me as well. And we also wanted to acknowledge the council members who sit on our boards respectively. So we have Councillor Murray, who sits on the Upper Thames board. We have Councillor Tam, who represents Asabo Bayfield, and also Councillor Matheson, representing Maitland Valley. So I will start the slideshow from the beginning here. This is always happens when it goes into full screen mode. Just sorry about that. There we go. You should see it now on the full screen. If I could just get a confirmation that that's visible.
Yeah,
Thank
we can
you,
see it,
Mayor
but
McKenzie.
yeah, but we can also see your speaking notes, Tracy. So
Oh,
maybe you want to get rid of them.
I turn that off. See, this is why I was hoping Daniel would be able to help.
So Tracy, this would kind of be like old times if I shared my screen and changed slides for you. So if you want, I
That
can
would be-
switch this. Oh, or somebody has, maybe somebody else has.
Yeah, I thought I had done that. Maybe I'm just getting a bit of a delay on my screen, but today, thank you,
Okay,
Jeffrey.
we'll change if you're having trouble with it, and I'll share my screen, but it looks like you've got screen control now.
Yes, I think it just might have been a delay because right now it's the overview. So today we're going to provide, if like you can confirm that you're on that slide that says overview of conservation authorities.
Tracy,
Yes.
I'll just
Yes.
clean this up quick. Is that actually Councillor Vink has stepped up and he is screen sharing.
Oh,
So if you want to direct your next slides to him, but you are on the overview slide.
okay. Thank you very much for that confirmation because I can't see. But yes, if I can cover a little bit of an overview today will be about the Conservation Authorities Act in general and some of the timing of the changes and when they'll be implemented. And also we'll be each talking about our individual budgets as we go forward, recognizing that those budgets won't be in full force with the new regulation until 2024, but also providing at the end a few of the highlights of what we do as well. So next slide, please. So I'm told by your CAO, Mr. Brick, heavy on the Mr. there, that you guys are very well versed in what conservation authorities do and our roles and mandates. So we thought we'd jump right into the regulations that are new and how we'll be moving forward through our transition plan and agreements, and also outlining how the different program categories fall out in the new regulation and how that's laid out through regulation. So we have already submitted our transition plans to the province, and they were circulated to all of our member municipalities prior to December 31st of 2021. And now as we move through this transition period, we are preparing our inventories of programs and services. And those have to be finished and submitted to the province by the end of this month as well. Once those inventories of programs and services are submitted, they're the first draft. There are many steps along the way where we're going to be coming back to our municipalities and discussing next steps and moving through to new agreements, either through memorandums of understanding or cost apportionment agreements. And all of those steps will happen prior to January 1st, 2024. So next slide, please. So when we are going through this process, one of the regulations has also been a mandatory programs and services regulation. And that regulation lays out exactly what conservation authorities are to be undertaking and have to undertake. The language used is CAs must provide. And there are four main areas. The first being natural hazards. Those natural hazards can be everything from flood control structures, operations, to mapping where those natural hazards are, floodplains, slope valleys, to undertaking permitting responsibilities as we are required to through regulation, keeping people safe and out of those hazard lands, and also through our delegated responsibility on commenting on natural hazards through the provincial policy statement. Also, the next area is understanding that conservation authorities have a large amount of land. We are the second largest landholders in the province, and those lands have certain liabilities associated with them. They did include passive recreational use, recognizing that many properties that CAs own, there isn't a gate fee to get into those properties. Instead, they are lands that people can use the trails, park at, and like any municipality knows, when you have land, they are also liabilities. There needs to be insurance. There needs to be a management of those lands to reduce risk. We also have requirements to undertake provincial stream and groundwater monitoring. These are provincially established sites. Many of these sites are, have been long-standing data collection for more than 20 years, and in some cases 50 years. So having that record of data that the ministry then makes decisions on. Not to say that conservation authorities, many have gone beyond that. We need even further stream and groundwater monitoring sites to better inform decision-making, to better understand our local conditions and at a sub-watershed scale. And then the fourth item is the Source Protection Authority under the Clean Water Act. That is keeping those source protection plans update and based on our source protection regions. So these areas often go beyond just a single watershed and are often groupings of conservation authorities that provide this service. The one thing that you'll notice that isn't in this list is kind of those watershed stewardship and community partnership programs. They're not considered mandatory, but certainly those will fit into different categories of programs. So with the next slides, I can cover what those categories are. Category 1 is the term used for those mandatory programs and services that are, again, established through that regulation and are to be municipally funded through levy. Category 2 programs are those programs that the municipalities are asking conservation authorities to do. So the way I think of these different categories of programs is who's doing the asking. So category 1, the province. Category 2 are the municipalities. And those are usually done through a memorandum of understanding. A great example that we have is providing risk management services based on a program that is for municipalities that would normally be required to undertake that service, but have asked the conservation authority to do it on their behalf. And then the third category of programs are those other programs that are either at the request of our board of directors or through community engagement to provide those programs and services. And the funding mechanism there can be through agreement, either with municipalities or other agencies, through cost apportionment, or through government grants or other conservation authority revenues. And oftentimes we are quite successful at leveraging those municipal dollars to apply for government grants to top the programs and services up. So the next slide is about the timeline for how we're seeing these things unfold. It's already mentioned we had the transition plans due at the end of 2021 and inventories of programs and services at the end of this month. But as you can see, there's a long period between now and at the end of October. October 1st technically is when we have an opportunity to ask for an exemption if we're not making good progress. But I think all conservation authorities are making this priority to progress through negotiating agreements. But having these quarterly reports that we're submitting to the province so that they can understand where each conservation authority is at in ultimately coming to the transition date of having our new budgeting processes in place for January 1st of 2024. They still allow us kind of a month period to finalize those agreements and submit them to the province, but ultimately that budget process starts January 1st. And then there's a number of deliverables that are established through the mandatory programs and services regulation that talks about the requirement for ice management plans where they're needed, operational plans for our flood control systems, and having asset management plans in place, having a broader conservation area strategy. And they use the term area. I always like to refer to it broader as conservation lands. Having a land inventory of exactly what's on our properties, and then the broader watershed-based resource management strategy. And that's something that, we really try to integrate all of our programs and services into a more holistic view. What's happening on the land is really affecting those downstream users. And ultimately runoff conditions. So much is tied together. So the idea is to have that broader resource management strategy that shows how all of our programs and services operate in that holistic manner. Next slide, please. With the phase 2 regulations, they were just released January 26th. So we've been able to sit in on some webinars. Hopefully some municipalities have been able to join in as well that the province has been hosting. But from my perspective, I haven't seen a lot different. Again, the emphasis for the phase 2 regulations is to really focus on what's working. And so much is working and still providing that flexibility. I think the working group has done a great job. That's the Conservation Authorities Working Group, working with the province and developers and other stakeholders to really understand that conservation authorities, much like municipalities, we all have a little bit different size. We might all have a little bit different local interest, but we're all operating with the same end goals. So certainly we don't want something to be terribly prescriptive because there are these different circumstances. And we do have well-established budget processes that do work, but certainly what we can all improve on is greater transparency. And in the end, I think that's the biggest focus will be to make sure that we have a transparent process moving forward. So with that, and as stated before, there's really not changing a whole lot of how we're doing our budgeting for 2020. This is for this transition period over the next 2 years, but I'll ask Brian to share his budget in the next few slides. Brian?
Okay, thanks, Tracy. So yeah, just a little background for the next, we'll say 3 or 4 slides that we have here. These are part of the package that we sent back to, to Mr. Brick and to you, Council, back in October, November. And as it says there, it says proposed general and project levy. Our board actually unanimously, and as Mike, our great rep there, your rep there, they unanimously passed the budget back in December. So that proposed is no longer there. Just a couple of things here. I mean, overall, we have a proposed budget of 2.43% increase. As you can see for West Perth, it's a little more than that, about 2.8. As I'm sure you've, most of you realize, and I've said before when I've done my budget presentations, the reason for that is that, you know, West Perth's assessment value has gone up on average more than our other member municipalities. So that's why that is. Next slide, please. So this one here is our consolidated revenue and expenditure budget that we have. And again, background for this, we all the programs and projects that we originally showed in our 5-year forecast back, well, it was actually back in July of 2021, are in here. There's some that we've decided to postpone, or if we can, we've gone over maybe over a couple of years. And when that 5-year forecast came out, it originally had an annual increase of about 9.5%. And as I've alluded to before, when we came down to our actual annual budget, we've actually got it down to around the 2.43%. A couple things I'd like to make a note of here that sometimes come up. You might not see it in our nice green boxes, but at the very bottom line, we actually budget a deficit, and some people question that. What that deficit is of 178,000, that's actually equal to our amortization. So in reality, that's just a paper loss, I say, as opposed to an actual cash loss. The other items I want to bring to your attention, because it always comes up, if you look under partnership contribution revenue, quite often it comes up, how can we budget or how can our budget be so much less than our actual? When we come at budget time, we only include amounts where we have signed funding agreements with different agencies, whether it be the province, OMAFRA. We have some this year. We also have we had last year for with the federal government, the Canada Nature Fund amount. So those are big reasons why we have increased. Then you see it in the partnership contribution revenue. At the same time, you see a corresponding, not dollar for dollar number, but down in the expenditure line, you see under programs, we also see a big increase from what we had budgeted and what the actuals are. So there's some of the highlights in that one. The next two charts that I have, next slide, the revenue expense. Now, while we like to think, some people will like to think that all conservation authorities are equal. That's not necessarily the case. And in our case, you see on that revenue chart, we show where do we get our revenue. And the two items I like with the general and project levy, because those are, they're quite often the concerns of the municipalities. Combined, those are about 28%. And so what I'd like to say is for those local dollars, we'll say, of the 28, we generate another $2.50 we leverage for other revenue. So we still do a good bang for the buck on the leveraging side of it. The next chart here on the expenditures, that's just showing, where we spend our expenditures by different program, the stewardship projects, recreation, and property management. And now those items, I will say that if you look at, not exact percentages, but for the most part, majority of CAs will have those. When I look at the surveys, quite often those percentages groupings are somewhat more consistent than the revenue part of it. So those are some of the highlights. And I know we're just, we're kind of just going to each go through our budget. So if you have questions on our budget at the end, by all means. But now I'll turn it over to Phil.
Thanks, Brian. And it's good to see everybody again. It's been a long time. So in our 22 budget and levy, we've one of our priorities is to try and stabilize our funding base so that we can provide a high level of service for our core services and maintain our essential infrastructure and equipment. And just like everybody else, our infrastructure is aging and needs some work. So in our 22 budget, we're adding some more help in our conservation areas section because of the demand for use in our conservation areas and maintenance. We're also renovating our workshop and building a new shed so that we can actually keep our vehicles and equipment inside. Our budget for 2022 is the highest in our history at just over $5 million. And that's mainly because of all the infrastructure projects that we're undertaking in 2022, both at our admin center and up at the Falls Reserve, where they're finally able to put in a new septic system after 20 years. We've been trying to keep the levy at $58,000 increases for the past few years, but that hasn't allowed us to keep up with the demand for services and to decommission surplus infrastructure and to maintain the essential equipment and infrastructure that we have. In 2021, we just got back to the same staffing level that we had in 1995. However, as I said, all our infrastructure is 25 years older, and the challenges that we have to deal with are certainly much greater. So you can see the draft levy for West Perth will be increasing by $610. We do have a very small portion of West Perth. Next slide, please. And just getting back to non-mandatory services, MVCA has been focusing its services down to a few key areas. So the only non-mandatory levy service that we have is stewardship extension services. So that's soil and water conservation, tree planting, watershed monitoring. And as Tracy noted, it will be up to each municipality to decide whether they want to support that service. However, the staff that work in stewardship also help out in other service areas. So it is core to our organization, and we do need to look at it as a whole. So our members are interested in getting a memorandum of understanding that covers all of our services, not just the non-mandatory ones. Okay, back to Tracy.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, I included this slide here just to recognize that, yes, we're all talking about budgets, but really the budgets are an ends, right, to what we actually want to accomplish watershed wide. So a few of the things that we've accomplished, call it year in review by the numbers, but 14 flood bulletins. While many of them didn't amount to a significant event, we did have one fairly significant event in September. I know some areas of the watershed had 4 and 5 inches of rain, but when you're looking at those bulletins, yes, we're keeping an eye all the time, but we've been very well able to manage flooding because of our ability to regulate and to plan. So through keeping people out of those hazard areas, it makes those events really demonstrate that if you've got people that are staying out of those flood prone areas, then you're protecting life and property. So certainly successful that way. We were able to hatch over 4,000 spiny soft shells and another 2,000 turtle species in our labs, and put those back. And as you know, most turtle species are at risk. We were able to connect, even during a pandemic, to over 10,000 students and community members, at times in person when we were able, but other times through virtual events. Planting over 44,000 trees on private land. I think, you know, you see a smiling face in the top right-hand corner, but with a mask on, certainly still being able to deliver those programs and services just in different ways. We had over 14 cover crop projects under the Clean Water Program, over 160,000 overnight campground guests, and over 264,000 visitors to our conservation areas. So pretty significant. On this slide, I'd just like to highlight, again, this is our draft budget. We are still in a draft form. Our budget goes to our February meeting of our board of directors for approval. But total combined revenue, we have just over 18 million. I always like to highlight on the left-hand side kind of where that distribution comes from. 4% from the province, 38% just over from municipal levy, whereas the remainder is self-generated. Again, just like Phil was able to elaborate on, is that when we're looking at that funding received from our municipalities, we're able to leverage that through fees, donations, contracts, proposal writing to anyone who will accept it. But for West Perth specifically, outlined in that green box, the total levy is about 145,000. But as you can see from the bottom line, out of that 18 million, about 7 million is funded through levy in our municipal partners. With our budget as well, we do divide things from operating into capital. We did have a 3.5% increase for operating. Some of that goes to the current value assessment numbers changing slightly, but in other cases, as we all can experience, you know, cost of living, inflation rates, cost of fuel, insurance, a big one for us. I think we had an increase of about $65,000 in our insurance costs alone, which was between 22 to 23% increase, which was significant. Some of the capital projects on the slide there, you can see in the photo, Mitchell Dam. One of the projects there is the gabion lining of the banks that you can see as we're looking south or downstream that line the banks need to be inspected and some repairs undertaken to those gabion baskets. That's one of the projects. There's another project proposed to implement some of the recommendations of the Fullerton Environmental Assessment. That project will most likely continue for a few of those actions over the few years, but getting a start on some of those recommendations. So with some of the other activities that we've been able to do with events and through previous year's budgets, and some of the direction that the community has provided us is to have more community involvement. We were able to undertake Nature Nearby, which we had 2 events in partnership with the Mitchell Rotary Club. We were able to have those events out at the West Perth wetlands. There's some more events proposed this winter and spring as well. I think we can all recognize through COVID, people are appreciating those opportunities to get outside in our recreational areas and in our park systems. And we work as well and participate with the West Perth Environment, Forestry and Trails Committee, because I think we share common goals in that regard. We're also able to undertake some tree planting and shrub planting in partnership with West Perth and through Mitchell students, both at the high school from Mitchell High School and also the Upper Thames Public School, planting about 150 trees in partnership with TD, Friends of the Environment, in October. But then also having an opportunity to go out with Upper Thames staff and plant and continue planting along World Creek. And I know that's been going on for a few years. Next slide, please. We're also able to work with West Perth staff on the Mitchell Dam Reservoir Vegetation Management Plan. After the Henry Street Bridge project was completed, I know certainly it helped having water levels down during the construction of that bridge, but then the challenging vegetation that moved in during that time period. I know Natural Resources Solutions Inc. was hired, but we were able to work with them to identify those parameters to monitor, to assist with water quality, manage the vegetation as we increase the reservoir level up to normal summertime levels, and also that ongoing communication, not just between ourselves and Perth staff, but also with the other agencies involved, like the Ministry of Environment, Conservation of Parks, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada. We've also been able to work as well with invasive species control throughout West Perth in a couple areas, in Mitchell and in the West Perth wetlands. I think it was about 2.5 acres of Japanese knotweed were treated in June and August. It's always challenging to work with these invasive areas, especially if pesticides are used. They can't be used around water, so there's still some more work to do. We're hoping to continue the progress that's been made to date. And also some locations of giant hogweed at the Mitchell Golf Club. That species can be very dangerous to be having it where people are in close proximity. Certainly working with the Mitchell Golf Club, but even those efforts wouldn't have been possible without the work and coordination with the neighboring landowner. They were very cooperative in being able to treat that broader area together. So I think in all, we've been very proud of the effort, the commitment of staff, both our own staff, but also our municipal staff, to leverage that investment that's made from our municipalities to deliver the broad range of programs that we do to improve watershed health. And all of that helps to build more resilient communities in the face of a climate change. So speaking of faces, there's some good looking faces there. A couple other efforts that we're doing coming up is working with the municipality to utilize bricks from some of the structures in Motherwell to incorporate in the new municipal building as a feature wall in order to recognize the history of the area. Also working to incorporate some rain gardens and swales at the new municipal building and building in that green infrastructure. So looking forward to 2022, where we can continue our collaborations together. So as said previously, we're all able here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you. Oh, Mayor McKenzie, you're on mute.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. To the three of you, Tracy, Brian, and Phil, I think it was a very interesting presentation, and kind of it's a new concept for us, but I kind of enjoyed the teaming up that went here. So I'm going to open it up for questions. I understand that Councillor Trinkowski is having some internet problems, so I will, I'll just ask for general questions and then I'll check with Dean to see if he has any questions as well before we leave this. So is there anybody that has a question at this time? Nicholas?
As we work on our next official plan, how is the Conservation Authority involved in commenting on the natural heritage features that would show up in this official plan?
You want to take a stab at that, Tracy?
Sure, I was looking to see if Brian and Phil had anything to add. But certainly the Upper Thames, working with our other CAs, have been very involved in the past in the natural heritage studies that have happened for the broader county level, and certainly reviewing official plans. I know that work is moving ahead. There's been kind of some starts and stops. I saw some very early drafts provided by Sally quite some time ago, but yes, we're always looking at that. We're looking at the recommendations that we have from our watershed report cards, looking at what environmental targets the municipality is hoping to achieve, and making sure that there's policies that align with that. Now, certainly those are not those mandatory programs and services that would be listed because it's not related to hazards, but as stated earlier, that's something that conservation authorities are always looking at more holistically, and how that ultimately affects our watershed more broadly.
And
Brian,
could I,
Phil?
could I follow up on that, Walter?
Yes, go ahead.
So are you specifically getting involved in defining what a natural heritage feature is and how that definition would impact then specific lands?
Through Mayor McKenzie to Councillor Vink, yes, we in the past have, I haven't looked honestly myself, staff have been looking at the OP, but in the past it's been based on the methodologies that we've provided to the county, and that again worked by conservation authorities to look at not just woodlands, but any of those patches that could be connected to be part of a broader system. In Oxford County, we termed the term used there was ecologically important. So there was provincially significant areas that were considered natural heritage, but then there was those ecologically important areas for connection. So, but apologies, I haven't looked at it myself, but certainly our staff will be reviewing and commenting on that.
Yeah, I really don't, I really don't have anything to add. I mean, I can follow up with to see what as Tracy, I haven't specifically looked at it myself, but I know Mr. Cade at our office has been involved with any of them. So,
okay, Phil.
Yeah, at the Maitland, we don't have the resources to look at natural heritage, so we're sticking to just looking at natural hazards in terms of supporting municipalities. We just don't have the resources to cover natural heritage.
Okay. Anybody else? Other questions? I can see Dean in one square, and I also have his name in another square. So I'm looking at where I see his video going. So any questions, Dean?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I wanted to thank Tracy, Brian, and Phil for their presentations. It provides a lot of clarity and good detail. My question was about the cover crop project. I think Upper Thames was working on a cover crop project. They mentioned 14 projects. So I was curious to know more about some of the details of those cover crop projects, and going forward on cover crop projects, will the Conservation Authority, whether it's Upper Thames or Ausable, Bayfield, or Maitland, will they be collaborating with other industry groups like soil and crop associations or grain farmers of Ontario, that sort of thing? Thanks.
Yes, I can certainly start through Mayor McKenzie. To Councillor Tarnowski. We do cover crops throughout our watershed, and we've been very fortunate to establish this year a demonstration farm just outside of Thorndale. We kind of had our kickoff earlier this year, an event in the spring, and then another event in the fall where we are utilizing cover crops on that site. Again, an opportunity to partner with many different industries as well as associations to come out and learn more and research cover crops. We also do a number of cover crop projects in the Upper Medway, so just outside of West Perth, but certainly using different application techniques, even using helicopters to spread seed when the ground's been so wet, not frozen enough too. And so certainly I think there's lots of different opportunities, and we're always welcome to partner with many different agencies, whether they be government or non-government, even with some of the geomatics firms that are looking at GIS and use of GIS to delineate farm fields to get that precision accuracy of what everything from fertilizer inputs to what crops we're getting off the land. And like you say, the possibilities are really endless because there's so many different groups that would and have partnered with us in the past. So, Brian or Phil, I don't know if you have anything else.
Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, Tracy's doing a good job by being our lead here, but I'd echo those comments too. And I guess, to the counselor, if you have someone in interest for our area, if you contact Nathan Schuler at our land and stewardship manager, he's more than happy to work on the projects. I mean, we've had recent videos that we've got out there on the YouTube that we're certainly encouraging it, and we've had a lot of good uptake on it.
Yeah, and both the Sauble and Maitland helped to deliver the Huron Clean Water Project. So that covers 2/3 of our watershed. So they provide grants to farmers who want to try cover crops, and we work with them on the paperwork and the technical details to help it go ahead. And then we also help deliver the Wellington Rural Water Quality Program, which also offers grants for cover crops as well. So it's a big part of our watershed stewardship services.
Thank you. Very good. Anybody else have any questions? Nicholas, ahead.
Yeah, one more, if I may,
Sure.
Walter. Thanks. I was wondering, Tracy, if you needed the Mitchell Dam again as a stormwater management tool, because I think you used it this past year as one, rather than just a recreation facility that you might take some ownership back, using it as a tool again.
Yes, if I may, through Mayor McKenzie to Councillor Vink, with our needs for water. We're looking at the provincial needs for operating it for flood control. So when we come down to that, so stormwater management a little bit different because it's quantity and quality control, and that isn't our responsibilities. Again, as you mentioned, it's a recreational structure. There is downstream, were certainly some properties that were acquired because of their location in the floodplain, and the channel work itself helping to convey floods within the channel, but not the reservoir.
So you didn't use it. My mistake on terminology. You didn't use it as flood control this past year.
No, if I can through the mayor, we do operate it to prevent the dam from being susceptible to flooding, because we do want to make sure that any structures, there's always dam safety reviews to make sure that they are safe and that the structure themselves are not going to fail during a flood event.
Okay, good questions. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see any further questions. I guess I would just like to thank the three conservation authorities for coming tonight and making this presentation. As I said before, I found it very informative, and it's kind of nice to have everybody here at the same time. It It maybe took a little longer, but I don't think that much. If we had three people come on 3 different nights, or whether we have 3 people come on 1 night. But I found it very informative, and I think the rest of council did as well. So thank you very much for participating in this tonight.
Yep.
And
Thank-
yeah, all the best in 2022.
Well, thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Yeah.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Very good.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on here. We do have another delegation. Well, not really a delegation, but we have Rob Lightfoot with BDO, our auditor. And so at this time, look, there's Rob. I will ask Rob to run through our financial statement for the municipality. So Rob, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor McKenzie. I'll start with the auditor's report, assuming you all have that in front of you. So in the first paragraph, we identify the statements on which we're opining. So these are your statements for the year ended 2020. And I'll just read the second paragraph, which is the gist of our report, our opinion. In our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the consolidated financial position of the municipality as at December 31st, 2020, and its consolidated results of operations, its consolidated change in net financial assets, and its consolidated cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. The next paragraph provides the basis for our opinion, which is to say that we conducted an audit in accordance with Canadian generally accepted auditing standards. The next section just reminds the reader that these are your financial statements, they're your responsibility. And then we have a lengthy section on our responsibility and generally what's entailed in an audit, what we do. And that report is dated as of today because hopefully this is the date at which the statements will be approved by council. So on to the financial statements proper. The first one is the statement of financial position. So here we're looking at the assets and liabilities of the municipality at the end of the year. So I'm looking at the column for 2020. And we can see that in public sector accounting statements, it's a little different than profit-oriented statements where we divide up the assets and liabilities according to current and long-term. Here we don't make that distinction, but we divide them as to financial assets and liabilities and other non-financial assets. So under the heading financial assets, so that comprises cash, a variety of receivables, investments, and inventories for resale. So that's an interesting one because inventories can either be held for resale, which means they're going to be converted to cash, or they can be for your own use. So those ones that are for your own use, we show down below as non-financial assets. So financial assets were about 29.5 million. Then there were liabilities against those assets of a little over 6 million. So net financial assets at the end of the year of 23,351,000. Then the non-financial assets, of course, are comprised primarily of your tangible capital assets. So all those infrastructure assets which you've paid for over the years, and these are at depreciated values. And I should just add that whenever you see a note referenced in parentheses, that means that later when we get to notes, there'll be further details on that particular item. So once we add in the non-financial assets to the net financial assets, we have the accumulated surplus of just under 121 million at the end of the year. That's followed by the statement of operations. So here we're looking at the revenues and expenses for the year, breaking down the revenues, which totaled about 20.5 million for the year. So mostly, the big ones are taxation, user fees, government grants. And again, there's further details on many of these in the notes. Then we have expenses by function. So general government, protection, transportation, environmental, etc., totaling 15.5 million. So that gives an annual surplus for the year of just under $5 million. Added to the accumulated surplus brought forward from last year of 116 million. That brings us to just under 121 million, as we saw on the statement of financial position. That's followed by the statement of change net financial assets. So this is comparable in my mind to the old statement of changes in working capital we used to see in regular business financial statements. So to arrive at that kind of working capital or financial asset flow, we start with the annual surplus, which as we saw was 4.8 million. Some of those things are not really making changes in working capital, so amortization of tangible capital assets, losses, write-downs of capital assets. Those things are not resulting in changes in the working capital or financial assets. And then there's the amortization of tangible capital assets of just under 10 million, which is included in determining that annual surplus. But because it doesn't affect working capital, we add it back. So when the smoke clears from that bit of math, the change in net financial assets for the year was a decrease of just over $250 million. Taking that away from last year's net financial assets gives us the 23,351,000 that we saw on the statement of financial position. That's followed by the statement of cash flows, which is similar in nature to the changes in net financial assets. Here we're just looking at the change in cash, so the source and use of cash. So again, to arrive at that, we start with the annual surplus and we adjust for things that don't consume cash or provide cash, such as amortization, the changes in the various financial assets and liabilities. So dropping all the way down to right near the end there, the total change in cash was a decrease of 4.7 million. And you can summarize that basically in 4 subtotals. There's operations, positive 7 million, capital transactions, a decrease of just under 10 million, investing transactions, so more was put into investments, just over 1.7 million, and then financing transactions, repayment of long-term debt of just under $250,000. So those all net to that $4.7 million decrease. Again, taking that away from last year's cash balance, bringing us to the cash balance at the end of the year that we saw in the statement of financial position. The statements are followed by a number of notes which are designed to enhance your enjoyment and understanding of the financial statements. I'll just highlight a couple of them. First of all, in the statement of, or in the summary of accounting policies, basis of consolidation. So just noting here that this includes the library board and the BIA. Also the way that the government business enterprise, that's the Erie Thames utility, is accounted for under the modified equity method of accounting. So you're probably familiar with cost accounting, where you have the cost of your investment and then any dividends and such that you get would be income. Under the modified equity method, you have your investment at cost originally, but then you add to it your share of its income and deduct from it your dividends that you receive. So it's kind of a bit of a moving target. Over the page to tangible capital assets. So here we're describing the amortization rates that have been used to write down these assets over time, hopefully matching them to their estimated useful lives. A note that though you raised taxation for the county and school board, these figures are not included in your statements, except to the extent that they show, liabilities. You've got the money and you still owe it to them, but it doesn't hit your income or expense. Similarly, trust funds, they're not included in here either. They have their own statements. So then down to note 1, investment in government enterprise. So here we have a breakdown of the book value of the investment we saw on the statement of financial position and what that comprises. So it comprises both debt, so promissory notes receivable, plus common shares and pref shares. Then, as I mentioned, those costs are reduced by dividends received, amortization of purchase premium, and then added to the your share of income from the utility. That continues on the next page, and that first part there is showing a summary of financial information from the ERTH, both in terms of assets and liabilities, and then operations, and coming down to your share of the income that's calculated there. So their income for the year was just under $3 million, $2,945,000, and your share was 184, and then amortizing the purchase premium brings your share down to 147,000 for the year. Note 2 gives a bit of details on the investments, so primarily in GICs, but also some principal protected notes, which are basically GICs that have interest calculated based on a particular exchange gain or loss for the year, like stock exchange increase. So if the market's making 10%, you will get some sort of percentage of that. So it would vary from year to year, with the principal always being guaranteed. Note 4 gives some detail on the deferred revenue we saw in the statement of financial position, opening balance, and then what we received, how much was recognized as revenue, and the major components of that: development charges, and recreational land, and often federal gas tax can be a big number. Note 5 deals with the solid waste closure and post-closure liabilities. So as you know here, as you use your landfill, you not only incur costs in the present, but there will be future costs associated with today's usage. When the time comes to close it, there'll be cost, and then to maintain it after it's been closed. So the idea of this calculation is to calculate the present value of those future costs that are rising today and show them on the balance sheet as a liability. And then, of course, any change in that liability would flow through the income statement. Note 6 gives some detail on the long-term debt. So there are a number of loans there in addition to the tile loans. So those total $846,000 as per the statement of financial position, and then we've shown the expected long-term repayment of those over the next 5 years, basically. Note 7 gives more detail on the tangible capital assets, breaking it down by category, showing the cost and the accumulated depreciation and the change for the year. Note 8 breaks down the accumulated surplus. And further to the disclosure that we don't recognize the tax revenues raised for the school boards in the county. There's just some details on how much that is. It's raised and remitted during the year. Note 10 gives some details on the federal government transfers, and of course the big increase there, the 607,000. Those are basically COVID-related grants from the federal government. Note 11 gives the same sort of breakdown with respect to grants from the province. Not too much different there this year. And then other income is detailed somewhat in note 12. On the statement of operations, we saw the expenses listed by function. Here we've switched it up and categorized them by object. That's note 13. A little summary of the trust funds held in note 14. Skipping down to note 17 in the spreadsheet part. So we have here detailed expenses not only by function, but also by object at the same time. So you've got this chart that breaks them down both ways. For the current and comparative year. And then finally, a separate statement for the BIA, although it is consolidated. We just have a separate statement here for information purposes. That is a whirlwind tour through the statements. If you have any questions, I will do my best to answer. Otherwise, I'm sure somebody will help me out.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Yes, and Nicholas has a question. So go ahead, Nicholas.
I was wondering, Rob, why you had to restate the 2019 trust fund dollars.
Well, apparently it was decided that I guess the trust funds were perhaps we were recording their revenues expenses, which were the municipality's responsibility. Now, I'm not sure it was actually wrong to do so because I mean, those revenues and expenses did go through those trust fund accounts. So I think they were properly recorded, but I guess the idea is that the municipality should be paying for those expenses themselves and keeping that revenue to pay for them, so that the accounting would transfer from the trust fund statements to the general financial statements.
And then I have a second question, Walter, if
Go
I can.
ahead. Yeah.
I was wondering then, now that we're done 2020, what's your plan for 2021 and 2022? So 2021 coming up right on its heels, and then then Q1 of 2022 we'll be back on track, say approving the statements in February, March.
Well, I don't know, if you've ever approved them in February, March, have you?
I think maybe before amalgamation we did when they were a lot smaller, but
Right, yeah.
not in recent years, I don't think.
It's generally, you know, most municipalities end up getting their audits done usually starting in April, May, and we try and get them done in that time. Sometimes they drag on longer, but yeah, it's really tough to get them done in February or March. I do remember the days when Northeast Hope used to have their FIR drafted by the end of the first week in January, which wasn't sure how we did that. But so I believe your audit is scheduled for it's somewhere in April or May to start. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we have the personnel and the time lined up, at least from our point of view. I'm not sure if we've conferred with your staff or not, but so yeah, we were planning to get back to normal with the 2021 year, but not quite as normal as you're thinking.
I think you made the comment about, did you say Northeast Hope or Southeast Hope?
It was Northeast Hope.
Northeast Hope, yeah. And I think it was always a race between them and Fullerton Township, who would get them in first, because I think they always aimed to be in within the first couple of weeks of January. So it was a bit of a race on there. Other questions for anybody? Okay, I don't see anything or anybody putting their hands up. Dean, you're with us. Any questions there? You're with us, and then I noticed we lose you, and then you're back again. So nothing.
Nope,
Okay.
all good, Your Worship. No, it's
Okay.
good.
Okay, I have a resolution here then, a recommendation, and we'll deal with it at this time if there's no further questions. And it's that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth approve the audited financial statements for 2020 as presented by BDO. Do we have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Vink, and a seconder for that, please, Councillor Tankowski. Any further discussion? Last chance to have a kick at it here. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. So thank you, Rob. Thank you for that. And I know it wouldn't be a big advantage maybe, but I'm wondering if we could have shared the screen, if that would have helped for anybody, not necessarily for us because we have it here, but for anybody that is watching this on the Zoom call. A lot of verbiage there. But the way we were going through it, fairly fast. I'm not sure you would be able to catch it either, but they're available for the public if they have any concerns or questions about it. So thank you very much, Rob, for doing that.
Sure, and if you come up with any other questions, I'll be changing my desk until the end of April, so. Feel free to give me a call.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, bye now.
Good. Okay, moving on then. The next item then is the planning from the planning department. And we do have Sally McMillan coming on with regards to an official plan amendment 202. And it's with regards to a revision to section 6.3A. So if Sally is, I'm looking and I don't see her. Oh, there she is. Yep. I had to look on the other side. So Sally, I'll turn it over to you and you can take it away.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie, and good evening, everybody and members of council. Yeah, I'm with you tonight to share some information about an official plan amendment. It's related to second dwelling units, and section 6.3A is specific to settlement areas. And the subject matter of the amendment is specific again to accessory buildings. And this amendment was brought about or initiated by County Council. And the intention here is to remove a couple items seen as barriers to using second dwelling units as an option for housing in our communities. And the one specifically is about a 5-year requirement. So right now the policy says that you could establish a second dwelling unit within an accessory building, provided that that building was already 5 years old. So it's allowing the retrofit of an existing structure. And County Council has asked if for the amendment to remove that 5-year requirement, so that someone could, in a sense, convert a building that exists that's younger than 5 years old, or even perhaps build something purpose-built or new with the intention of putting a second dwelling unit in it. And the other proposed item here for removal is the requirement that a zoning amendment or variance be required if the accessory structure needed an addition of any kind to accommodate the additional unit. And so having that in there means that if you had a building and you were putting an addition on it, but you didn't necessarily have any other deficiency in the zone provisions, like a side yard or something, it would still necessitate a variance or a zone amendment just to recognize the addition. So those are the two items that are proposed to be removed through Amendment 202, making it easier for homeowners to implement this form of housing in neighborhoods. And it is a measure proposed by but legislated by the Ontario government for providing additional and some more affordable homes in the communities around Ontario. So this amendment would be aligned with those provincial policy and legislative changes that have come about over the years. as we work on the new official plan, it's a more thorough review of additional units, not just second units, but considering that the province now allows up to 3, but also looking at just a more fulsome policy environment across the different designation types. So not just settlement areas, but also into some of the more rural areas, and what provisions are most appropriate here. What are sort of the checks and balances to make sure that if people are going to use this form of housing, that it's successful and that it has all the servicing requirements and things and parking, for instance, that would be needed. And so that more fulsome update is intending to come through the new official plan. But these 2 barriers were seen as worth removing in the interim while we finish the new official plan. This is becoming and fast becoming a more popular, I guess you could say, form of housing, and homeowners are interested in providing second units for various reasons, but it also has benefits not only to the person who might live in the unit, but certainly to the homeowner as another form of income to pay for their own accommodations. So the county is going to be having a public meeting about this on February 17th. Myself and a couple of the other planners are trying to circulate to each one of the lower tier councils to point out this amendment and answer any questions. And it's possible that a decision might be made on same day, February 17th, but I guess it's most prudent to wait and see what comments or feedback might come from the public as well, leading up to that decision. So it would be in, February 17th or soon after that we might see that occur. So I am happy to take any questions that West Perth Council has on this particular official plan amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sally. Any questions from members of council? Doug, it plays into the committee you're on, I know.
Sally, as I've said, this won't make houses any cheaper in West Perth because you're getting extra income. We just had a subdivision come through last meeting. Susanna did it. And right in the thing, they said 21 semis that could all be converted to fourplexes. Of course, the big question was, from me, where are all these people going to park? Why don't we just make them fourplexes to start? Like, is there money saving for the developer? Is there? I should have asked Bob this question in advance. Seems like we're building something. How do you say that? We're building something that we really don't want. We want something different. We want a fourplex, but we build a semi that can have an apartment in the basement. Why don't we just call it a fourplex?
Well, through you, Mayor McKenzie, I love this question. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Because it does beg the question. So that particular subdivision, they're looking at building semis. That's their intention. That's what they want to do. Conversation, however, is unfolding as to whether or not there's interest there to purpose build some of those with a couple of so that a portion of them or some of them could have a second unit to begin with. And yet, given certain, if certain zoning provisions could be met and servicing was adequate, then, it's possible that any one person owning those semis in future could put a second unit in the bottom or in the top for that matter. And so the question is, it sort of becomes like, if we want more housing, why aren't we building that in the first place? And why isn't this subdivision coming at us with, like you say, instead of 2 units per lot, the 1/2 of each semi, why isn't it 4? And the question lies in this balance that we find ourselves constantly trying to reach between what is the developer interested in building? How can we have a conversation about affordable housing or edging us towards affordable housing, or even knowing how big the gap is between something that sort of meets the definition of affordable and and just a higher density that might be sort of closer to affordable, but perhaps still not meeting that definition, then we don't have policies to force this on folks. Even if we did, it probably wouldn't meet the definition of affordable. So right now, what we try to do anyways in the planning department is have a really serious conversation with each development that comes forward, especially in a subdivision, and say, hey, what do you know about affordability? Like, do you know the price point of your units? How close are they going to be to that? Are you interested, or do you have any knowledge or interest or ideas about how we might make some of these units more affordable? And so that led us in that particular case to a conversation about, do you want to make some of these have a second unit in them right from the outset? And there's a real advantage to having that conversation now, which is what I think you're pointing out, Deputy Mayor Ait, is that if this is something that is going to transpire in our communities, then wouldn't it be great if we could have that conversation when we're laying out the width and the frontage on those lots, so that we could think about parking, we could think about lot drainage and grading. And, eventually you're going to reach a threshold, and this is maybe too philosophical, but I was talking to some planners in other jurisdictions where additional units have become very popular, and they're now concerned in some of the older neighborhoods about capacity of public servicing. Like if you're going to take a neighborhood that has 20 houses in it, and then all of a sudden it's going to have, the equivalent of 40, then, you've got to make sure that the pipes are big enough, essentially. So, it's a very hard question to answer, but it's definitely a conversation that we want to have. And with every development, like I say, we're just trying to get the conversation going. Think about what opportunities exist in the development that's being proposed. And if possible, can we get some of them on the ground? Because we know there's a real need today. And, I would like to take the conversation further and say, well, do we have the frontages we need here? And so I hope that answers your question a little bit. I don't think I have a magic bullet answer for you, but that's sort of tying in the notion of second units, that subdivision that you just saw. And so where we're trying to go with this thing.
Okay. Doug,
it answers my question, but I think as a planning and forward developing, we should be doing it now, because people got to park on their lawn, or we're going to have to change our parking bylaw to allow street parking all the time on one side, because we already know that we don't have enough parking spaces. I brought up the fourplex by Value Mart parking lot and said the people there park in Steve Walton's parking lot all year round, because we never accumulated enough parking spots when we put that fourplex in there. You were, I don't think you were on count, or you weren't working here yet. This is going to be our major problem. Snow removal, people parking on the lawn. We have a bylaw coming that you're not allowed to park on your lawn, I believe. It kind of got put on the back burner. It's been around for about 6-7 months, I think. So we should be planning for this. Now, I suggested moving the houses back further. Those are 130-foot deep lots, I believe, when we did the math. They could have a lot more parking, but the planning's already done, so we didn't choose to do that. We're not choosing to do stuff forward thinking. We're reactive after the fact. I'll let that go.
Yeah. No, and I think an opportunity, Doug, when we review a plan of subdivision, is to keep that in mind, that either the houses move back a little further, or that we look at it that there is enough parking spots there to accommodate the future. You drive, when you go to Toronto and you drive down, I'm trying to think what street it is, but go through High Park, which is an older part of the city. But basically, there's no parking all the way through that whole section of Toronto. It was built, probably back in maybe the 30s, and And there's no provision. They have to rent a spot, or, you know, in the case with a lot of people in Toronto, they probably take a taxi or take the bus and they don't have a vehicle. Nicholas, you had a question?
Yeah, that leads into then why or what's the intention of striking the zoning bylaw amendment or minor variance portion of the amendment?
I'm going to go to that specific clause. And it reads, additions to accessory buildings for the purpose of accommodating a second dwelling unit are not permitted unless approved through a zoning bylaw amendment or minor variance to local zoning bylaw. So when I read this, I interpret that if you came forward with a proposal for a second dwelling unit in an accessory building on your lot that already met every other zone provision, you would still need an amendment just simply to recognize that an addition was required. And that is seen as a barrier. It's a financial barrier and a time barrier. So what is still intact is that if you're proposing a second dwelling unit and you're proposing an addition to it, or even if you're not, if it doesn't meet the zone provisions and you want to put it a second unit in there, and that's the design you want to stick with, then you still need to seek an amendment or a variance for that particular one. But what the language here that's being struck out or proposed to be struck out is that you don't just need one automatically because of an addition being proposed. That's a great question. Thank you.
Okay, there was somebody else had a hand up, I think, too. Maybe not. Is there another question? Oh, Doug, go ahead.
I just want to make sure, I think when I read this right, remember, you're not just having 2 units on a lot. You can have 3 units on a lot. You can have one in your basement, and then you can build an accessory building in your backyard so that you're allowed under Bill 108. You can have 3 residences, 1, 2 in the building. Oh, Sally's going to prove me wrong. 2 in the building and 1 is an accessory building out back.
Sally?
Well, Deputy Mayor, you are correct. You're not wrong. It's just that we don't currently permit that in Perth County, which is why we need a fulsome review of our official plans and our zoning bylaws, so that when we get to that stage of permitting the third one, that we have better provisions in there to provide for parking and other yard requirements.
You got to make the lots a lot smaller so they can't do all this. Higher density, shorter lots, higher density, two units. Because 3 units on one house, on one lot, I could do it because I have a deep lot, but it would be, I don't know, maybe it would be beneficial to me. But I don't know if it'd be beneficial to my neighborhood. So.
Okay. I'll go with Dean and then Mike. So Dean first.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's an interesting discussion, and as I was listening to the discussion, I think we have to keep in mind, as the Deputy Mayor said, forward thinking. With an aging population, not everyone will be moving into a nursing home or a seniors complex. There may be certain families that will want to have the elder generation still living with them so that care can be given to the seniors. So I can see advantages to making these changes to permit those kinds of living arrangements in the future. That was my comment.
Good. Thanks, Dean. Mike.
Just to comment, Sally, about the affordable housing or the affordable part of the component of it. Like I've said this before, the problem with that is that the developers are going to take what they can get, and it's driven by the market. So the only way that we're ever going to have affordable housing is if it's subsidized. Unfortunately, at this point in time, that's the only way I ever see it happening. So we see these numbers, and there's no point in even putting time into it in my mind, because it's always higher than what we see, and it's driven by the market. So you can't say now what something's going to be worth in 2 years from now. So just a comment.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions from council members here? Okay, I don't see any. I do have a recommendation here, and I'll read it. And then we'll get a move in second for that. And the recommendation is that the municipality of West Perth receives the proposed County of Perth official plan amendment OPA 202 revision to section 6.3A second dwelling units report for information, and that the Council of Municipality of West Perth recommends that the County of Perth Council approve OPA 202 affecting the settlement area lands countywide. Do we have a mover and seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Rose, and do we have a seconder? Councillor or Deputy Mayor Wright, open it up again. Any further discussion on this? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed, if any, that is carried. So thank you very much for your presentation, Sally. And wish you luck. You go from here to North Perth, do you?
No, I had some help tonight, so someone else went to North Perth.
Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you very much, Sally.
Yeah, my pleasure. Take care.
Okay, good. All right, next on the agenda is the library report, and we have Rosemary with us tonight to bring us up for that report. So Rosemary, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I'll keep this very brief for us tonight. The library board met on January 25th, and I think you have the meeting minutes in front of you. Just a couple of highlights. The capital projects are moving along for the library, beginning in December with the installation of new service countertops. The CEO office will be relocated next month to make space for a staff workroom, and new carpeting and interior paint is going to be addressed in the coming months. I'm going to be working closely with the library board members this year regarding a new strategic plan for the library. The current strategic plan ends this year. So phase one of that is going to be looking at public service trends, both locally and more broadly, and also local demographics. And the good news here is that Statistics Canada is going to be releasing 2021 demographic information in chunks throughout the year. And the first chunk of information they're going to be releasing is this coming Wednesday. So that's something we'll be keeping an eye on. And the library board continued with its ongoing policy review, and all of the library's policies can be found on its website. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Rosemary. Any questions for Rosemary with regards to the library board meeting? Okay, I don't see anybody's hand up, so I do have a recommendation here that the municipality of West Perth accepts the West Perth Library Board meeting report as information. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Murray, and a seconder, Councillor Matheson. Okay, any further comments? All right, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item up then is recreation facilities and parks. And Darcy is on the screen here, so take it away, Darcy.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie and council. This report is a bit of a good news story. We had both the RFP and the tender go out, and we were very happy with the results. We had a very good competitive bid process. We think timing played an effect on the price, being able to get it out nice and early. I will just note to council that site visit was done in January, so obviously it was full of snow, so there is some possibilities there might be some stuff found underneath that we don't know about, but other than that, we're very happy with the bid process, and we're happy with the prices. And as I noted in my report, we will be now working on the filters, and I'm going to take the stand out and investigate to see if a full replacement needs to be done or if there just needs to be repairs. So I'll probably have an update on that shortly. So other than that, I'll gladly take a question.
Okay, you're cutting in and out a little bit there, Darcy, but I think we were able to hear it, or hear most of it anyways. Any questions for Darcy on that? Okay, don't see anybody's hand up. So we do have a recommendation here. And the recommendation is that Municipality of West Perth authorizes the West Perth RFP number 01, 2022 outdoor pool resurfacing be awarded to CIP Contract Services in the amount of $61,700 plus HST, and that the council authorizes the West Perth RFQ number 02, 2022 pool heater replacement and chemical room exhaust fan install be awarded to Temperature Control Solutions in the amount of $35,200 plus HST. Do we have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Rose and Councillor Matheson. Any further questions? Do we get any assistance on this, Darcy, from like the Lions Club? I was thinking, like, are they helping to fund any of this?
No.
Okay,
No.
this is ours.
Yeah.
Okay, no, fair enough. Okay, any other questions? Okay, it's been duly moved and seconded. All those in favor of that motion? That is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Well, Walter,
Yes.
if I just note something else for council. I did speak with the Hawks today. They are looking for an extension of the ice. My thoughts were, and I'm open to comments tonight, but was that I would bring a report back on the 21st. The Hawks have done a good job. They talked to other user groups, so I'll be able to use some of that information, and I can report back on the 21st to council with a recommendation if that works for council.
I don't see any problem with that. I think it's good. You know, and certainly, you know, I don't think it's a surprise that this is coming. I think we were maybe kind of figuring that this would happen. So, any comments from anybody on council with regards to that? No. So I think we'll look forward to that in a couple of weeks. And Darcy, Jeff, you have something you want to comment on?
Yeah, I just want to mention the 22nd. So Family Day is on the 21st. And you should all make those plans. And Dan and I have been struggling with that. Now, Darcy, we're all having a hard time with that date. So it'll be the 22nd. I don't think that changes much, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, very good. Okay, moving on then. Thanks, Darcy. Moving on, we have some grant agreements here, and Wendy is going to go through that with us, I think. So Wendy, take her away.
Thanks, Mayor McKenzie, and good evening, Council. I'm happy to bring this report forward because it is announcing that we did get approval for the modernization intake 3 grant. And then it's also listing a couple other grants that has come through. So if there's any questions, I'll gladly take them.
Okay. I just wonder, Wendy, do you want to just briefly, I know we have it in our report, but I'm thinking for those that are maybe watching on Zoom, do you want to just highlight the amounts of the grants?
Sure. So for the gas tax, that is for the mobility bus. I'm just going to bring up the report. It is $45,800 or $658 for that one. And then the FCM, it's upwards to $50,000 or 90%. And that is for the condition data and collection analysis that we use for asset management for the roads and sidewalks. And then the modernization intake 3, we did 2 applications. The first one was the communications, and we have grant funding up to $61,056, and that covering the new telephone system, the intranet, and the digital sign. And then we have modernization intake 3, which is workflow, and that's upwards to $148,824 in grant, and that will cover the new server, workflow projects, cemetery software, and recreation software.
Thanks, Wendy. Okay, any questions? Okay, motion here then that the Municipality of West Perth approves the amended, nope, wrong one, that the Municipality of West Perth accepts the grant agreements report as information. We have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Murray and Councillor Bell. Last chance for questions. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And thank you, Wendy. Oh, question, Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe clarify some questions on the audit. So the audit is scheduled for the end of May, and that will be for the 2021. And then we extended that year agreement with BDO, and then the county and the lower tier municipalities will be working together to put an RFP for the 2022 audit year and going forward, just for clarification.
Okay. So the chances of the 2022 audit being done in February?
No. We will try our best to get it back on schedule in 2021, and then hopefully moving forward, we'll be on the normal regular rotation of audit and financial statements and FIR reporting.
Very good, thanks.
So is that a no because of our time constraints? Because I guess at the end of the year, you can close off the books fairly quickly if every month you're reconciling it now and just go straight into that, or is it a time constraint on the person that is on the other end at the auditors?
So BDO has, they're committed for other municipalities. So the availability of our auditor isn't available until the end of May of this year. Normally our interim audit would be in the fall. So we're combining the interim and the final starting in May. So hopefully we'll be able to, in a 2-week period, finish the audit. And then that should get us back into cycle. But then if we RFP and get a new firm, it'll be subject to their timeframes.
Right. So I do appreciate all the work that, certainly you and Terry and your department has put into this. I know that it's been a massive undertaking, and certainly do appreciate all the work that you've done to bring us up to speed here now. So thank you very much, Wendy.
Well, thanks for your support.
And Terry's on here yet, I believe, too. So we do thank her as well. So, okay. Any other questions for Wendy before we move on? Okay. The next item then is the meeting schedule, and Dan is going to talk to us about that, I guess.
Good evening, Council. Today is just a housekeeping item and a little bit to do with budget. So we are proposing to move the March 28th meeting ahead to March 21st and bring final budget approval on the 21st. Really what this does is get it done a week earlier, but it also gives us a week if we need to utilize it for budget if it gets delayed for any reason. If there's any questions.
Okay, any questions for Dan on that? Okay, seeing none. Recommendation here is that the municipality of West Perth approves the amended 2022 West Perth Council meeting schedule as presented. Do you have a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Harold and Councillor Tunkowski. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Thank you. All right, the next is the CAO's report, and Jeff, I'll let you take that away.
Council, I'm going to first of all talk about the report I've got on the agenda, and then I want to briefly touch base on the report that we had that didn't get on the agenda and what the plan for it is. So the report that's on the agenda deals with Montreal Street parking lot. I had been directed by council to negotiate a purchase and sale agreement, and the terms were set, and we brought back that report. We wanted to more clearly go through the process of declaring the property surplus to the needs of municipality. The clerk and I talked about this extensively, and I think we were probably exempt under the bylaw, but we just, in the interest of being fully transparent, we wanted to bring this forward tonight with the resolution to make it clear that the piece that we are declaring exempt at this point in time is the 20-foot or 6-meter addition to the adjacent property to the east. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that if there are any, or questions about next steps in our process for the Friendship Center property. I would be happy to answer them.
Any questions for the CAO at this time? No? Okay.
Great.
There has been a fair bit of discussion on it leading up to this. So the recommendation that we have here is that the Council Municipality of West Perth hereby declares the lands being 6 meters by 32.25 meters, more or less, and being part of PIN number 53195-0076 as those outlined in the bold and attachment A to this report as surplus lands. Do we have a mover and seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Rose, Councillor Tam, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried.
Hey,
All right.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie. And then I just want to mention that I had worked with some assistance with the clerk and a lot of work by Amara Kartik from who is our climate change coordinator to bring back a report that was intended to answer a number of questions that have been raised in the past about the climate change, provide a status update, and to recommend adoption of the report by council at tonight's meeting. We had a little miss and didn't get it on the agenda. And when it missed the agenda deadline to get on, we decided that we didn't want to rush it to get on the agenda. So we'll bring that report back. The report is written. We'll bring it to the February 22nd council meeting for approval. But what I want to mention is that Amara Kartik has taken a position, not surprisingly, with these contract positions in this current employment market. Amara has been recruited for another job. And so North Perth will be losing the climate change coordinator. So on that front, we're going to meet as a team to discuss what other options there are for that position in terms of its location and its configuration. And we would bring our reports back to our respective councils with recommendations through the budget process. I think the popular leading proposal at this point in time is that the county consider hiring the employee rather than one of the local municipalities, and perhaps making it a permanent position with prospects for growth in that area through the county in partnership with St. Mary's and Stratford. So I've got that matter. And then secondly, with Amara going to be done her work with North Perth and for the collective of the 7 municipalities on February 16th, if we leave this report until the 22nd, Amara, we wouldn't have an opportunity for Amara to respond to any questions. So after tonight's meeting, I will share a draft of the council report that was intended to be on the agenda, or I'll share the report we had intended to be on the agenda in an email to council and ask if you have any questions that you would like to specifically have me gather information on from Amara before her contract time with North Perth is complete. And then I'll do my best to get those answers into our report and bring the report to the February 22nd council meeting. And depending on the nature of those questions, Amara might be willing to actually participate in the meeting, even though her contract is completed, to help with answering questions. It just wouldn't be fair to ask her to do follow-up work. So we'll try to identify that before. So that's the plan. I apologize we don't have it to you tonight, but we'll adapt in that way.
Okay, any comments or concerns with that? No, okay, good. I think, yeah, I think if you can get that out fairly, fairly soon, Jeff, and give everybody a chance to look at it. And as we said, if there's any questions, then get them back so that we can have the answers for our next meeting. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on then, correspondence. There was a letter from the Minister of Finance with regards to payment in lieu of taxes. I believe that was the only piece of correspondence we had. So I would entertain a motion that we accept the correspondence as information. I have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Murray, and seconded by Councillor Rose. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Good. All right. we're down to council reports now. The first report is the BIA minutes from January the 5th. And Councillor Bell, is there anything there you want to highlight?
Nope, I think it's pretty straightforward. Yeah, if any questions, I can answer them, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, any questions for Councillor Bell on that? Okay, don't see any. The next one is the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, and Councillor Matheson, this is from December. Anything there you want to highlight, Cheryl?
Nothing to highlight. I think that was discussed actually with the presentation, was mostly came out of this from this meeting. If anybody has any further questions?
Okay, any questions for Cheryl on that? Just while we're on that subject, comments, good or bad, on the process tonight with having all three of them come and do a presentation? Good, bad, no different? I thought it went fairly well. That's my take on it. It was kind of nice to have them all there together. Okay, recommendation here is that we accept the municipality of West Perth accepts the reports from councillors as information. Mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Matheson, do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Bell. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, we do have a number of bylaws here. Bylaw 14, execution of the Municipal Asset Management Program Agreement. Bylaw 15, bylaw to authorize the execution of a letter of agreement for the dedicated gas tax funds. Bylaw 16 is a bylaw to authorize the execution of an Ontario transfer payment agreement for modernization intake 3. And bylaw 17 is a bylaw to authorize the execution of an Ontario transfer payment agreement for modernization intake 3 workflow and service delivery digitalization between the municipality of West Perth and Her Majesty the Queen, as represented by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And the recommendation that I have here is that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth gives first, second, and third and final reading to bylaw 14, 15, 16, and 17, the 7th day of February 2022. We'll get a mover and seconder, and then if there's any questions, I'll ask at that time. So we have a mover for those bylaws. Deputy Mayor Ait, and seconded by Councillor Trenkowski. Any questions with regards to any of those bylaws? It was all discussed, I think, pretty much in Wendy's report. Okay, if there's no questions, then all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, upcoming events. Our next meeting is the 22nd of February, and there'll be a draft budget presentation and budget deliberations at that time as well. And then the next regular meeting after that is March the 7th. And then we have moved the other one to the 21st of March. Any notices of motion? We're moving on here now. Okay, another business, council vacancy appointment, and I'm going to turn this over to Dan, and he's going to kind of explain how this is going to work. And then we'll bring in the 2 candidates that we have, and we'll go from there. So Dan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would ask, I guess at this time, if there's any questions. The report outlined the process we were going to look tonight, and at a high level, we'll bring each of the nominees in. We've already randomly selected the order with Mr. O'Donnell going first, and I'll thank planner Susanna Reed for that. And then we will have basically presentations to council, opportunities for questions, And then what we're going to do is, just to kind of control the Zoom environment, is we're going to remove everyone from the meeting with the exception of Labitza and myself, and we'll put a poll for council. The unofficial results, I'll say, should be viewable via the YouTube live stream, at which time we'll close the poll and request the mayor to do a brief recess. And from there, we'll just go into the back end on the poll and make sure that everything's correct and accounted for. And then we'll resume, and we can have the declaration and pass the bylaw moving forward. If there's any questions, happy to address them, or if there's any what ifs type scenarios, we can talk about those too.
Any questions for Dan? Okay. All right. Then I would guess we're ready to roll here then.
We just have the recommended motion to accept the report there.
Oh, okay. All right. Yep. Okay. All right. So the recommendation is that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth accepts the council vacancy appointment report as information. Mover and seconder for that, Councillor Tam and Councillor Rose. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Okay, so now we can start to roll. I think we've been waiting for this. That's kind of the highlight of the meeting. We like all good events, you save the best for last and you build the whole night up to this. So, so the first applicant that is coming in or is going to speak to us is Philip O'Donnell. And I see Philip is on the screen. I see his name there. Did see it there. There he is. Okay. All right. So the ground rules, I think that we had, we would allow you 5 minutes to kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself and the good, the bad, and the ugly if you wish. And you can leave the ugly out. That's fine too. So Philip, I'll turn it over to you, so we'll do the presentation, I guess, Dan, and then if there's questions, we'll ask at the end of that presentation. Is that how you want to do that?
I would let Mr. O'Donnell go, and then if you have questions,
okay.
Mr. O'Donnell,
So we'll do
Mr. O'Donnell.
Okay, so we'll do both presentations and then ask questions. Is that what you're saying?
No, I would do just
each one individually.
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's what I thought. Okay, all right, Philip, the floor is yours. So you just tell us all about yourself.
Good evening, Mayor McKenzie, Deputy Mayor, and Council. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to come on here and speak in front of all of you tonight. The reason I'd like to be a member of Council is to gain experience and knowledge in all political aspects and work together with all of you to keep this town growing and moving efficiently in the future. I'm definitely eager to learn and be part of a great council representing a wonderful community, all of you. And that's basically everything.
Okay. Any questions for, do you want maybe just give us a little bit of background, Philip? You know, what you've done or what you do or where you work at?
I've been in West Perth for 18 years and then I moved away to Alberta, and I'm with Hydro One Construction right now on a traveling crew, and we're working on projects up in Barrie.
Okay, good. All right, thanks very much. Okay, questions for Philip? Councillor Matheson.
Phil, I just wondered what asset do you feel will benefit you the most in your role as a potential councillor for West Perth?
That's a good one. I'm not 100% sure.
I would think the fact that you know, that Phil has spent a good number of his years in West Perth certainly, you know, would be an asset at this stage of the game. Certainly, I don't know whether you have anything further to add, Phil, or not.
No, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, I just like to see it pretty efficient moving forward.
Okay. Any other questions for Phil? Okay, don't see any. All right. So we'll bring in next candidate is Ryan Duck. And I'm looking and I don't. Oh, there we are in the corner. Okay, Ryan, there he is. Okay, welcome. And the process is, just give us up to 5 minutes, kind of a little bit of history about yourself and why you would want to be part of this group. And then we'll open it up for questions after that. So the floor is yours, Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor McKenzie, Deputy Mayor Ite, distinguished councillors, Clerk Hobson, and all the constituents following along at home today. I appreciate this opportunity to address you. My name is Ryan Duck, and I proudly live in West Perth with my wife, Jenna, and my 16-month-old son, Ryder. For about 95% of my teenage and adult life, I've worked for the Hudson family in Listowel and now Stratford for the past 6 years. I started out as a lot attendant there when I was 16 years old and have risen to the role of parks manager, something I take great pride in. In the summer, I've also doubled as a maintenance technician at the local campground on the weekends for the past 3 years. And in addition to this, I currently work in the community with the Mitchell Hawks organization as the team equipment manager and have served on the team executive in the past. Since I've been a young boy, politics are always something I've taken a keen interest in. I've followed levels of government, as long as I can remember, and I've actually had the opportunity to assist on a couple of municipal and provincial political campaigns over the years. I've always believed politicians have the power to change their surroundings and are put in place to do so for the betterment of their community. I also believe the only consistency in life these days is change, being open to change, and being able to adapt with enthusiasm. If elected, I promise I will listen first and foremost and make smart decisions based on all of the information provided to me at all times. West Perth is home to me. I met my wife here, I got married here, and I plan on raising my family here. It is incredibly important to me to get involved now so I can ensure my son is raised in the community that I have envisioned. People who know me will tell you that I'm a very loyal person. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm a very determined individual who sets goals and accomplishes them and strives to make this world a better place at all times. When I commit myself to something, I dive in with 110% effort, and I don't stop until I get what I want. This will be no different in my dedication to council. In politics, you will never appease everyone, as I'm sure all of you guys are well aware, but I promise every decision I make will be made with thought and integrity and what's best for West Perth. I am so proud to see the many improvements that have been made in this community since it's become my home. We have top-notch facilities, and the new administration building will complement that, as well as the recent renovations to the arena where I spend most of my time these days. I had the opportunity to speak to a colleague of mine earlier, Deputy Mayor Doug Kellum from North Perth, to discuss what this role entails and how one could be successful in it. Some advice he gave me: enthusiasm and dedication are the two biggest things he told me, and of course, well, how well North Perth and West Perth work well together. I promise all residents of West Perth I will give this job my all, and I will represent you all with pride, dignity, and urgency. I ask you fine folks to give me a chance to show you exactly how valuable I can and will be to your organization, and look forward to serving all of you. Thank you very much for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to go with those now.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. All right, questions for Ryan? Councillor Matheson.
Same question as I asked the previous candidate. What do you feel your asset do you feel would best benefit you in the role as a councillor?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Councillor Matheson. I'm a very determined individual. I set goals, like I said, and I put my mind to whatever I want to accomplish. I think it's important in any sort of job you take on to give it your all. I'm very determined. I'm a leader, and I think I have what it takes to help complement you fine folks on this council.
Okay. Any other questions for Ryan? Okay, I don't see any hands going up. So now, Dan, process from here.
Yes, thank you. So we will, I'm going to thank Mr. Duck and Mr. O'Donnell first for putting their names forward and for their presentation tonight. We're going to remove them from the meeting, and I'll just advise that they can watch on YouTube through the live stream. And then we'll be in contact with the selected nominee. At this time too, I'm going to ask even SLT and staff to leave the meeting, and then we'll release the poll for council, and we'll go from there.
And I guess just further to what Dan said, whoever the successful candidate is, you'll probably be asked to come into the office, and I think that's where you're going to be sworn in to be a member on council. And then once that's done, you'll probably be swore at by the residents, but that comes at a later date. So, okay. All right, Dan, take it away.
Okay, so poll should be coming up.
I'm assuming you want us to vote, Dan.
Yes, I do. I was just looking at the numbers there. I was one shy.
Well, you didn't actually say it. You just said polls coming up. That's cool.
Sorry. Yes, please
make
your selection. Okay.
We're good.
We'll end the poll, and then if we can, Mayor McKenzie will just go into a recess.
Okay. Yep, we can do that while Dan does the tallies here. So do you need a motion to recess, or I just declare we're having a recess? Labitza just puts up council's currently in a recess. Is that what happens?
I would, yeah, get a motion.
Get a motion? Okay, let's do it. Let's get a motion then that we take a recess. Mover and seconder for that, Deputy Mayor Wright and Councillor Trinkowski, all in favor? That is carried. So we're in recess.
Okay, and we'll just wait for Labitza to confirm.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, so we're back, and I'm going to turn it over to our clerk, Dan, for the results of the vote.
Thank you, Worship, and again, thank you to both nominees for coming forward. Council has moved to elect Mr. Ryan Duck. So congratulations, Mr. Duck.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to echo Dan's comments to the two people that came forward, and thank you very much for submitting your names, and look forward possibly to reacquainting ourselves with you in the near future again. So we do have a recommendation here. And the first recommendation is that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth gives first reading to bylaw number 18th, the 7th day of February. Mover and seconder for that. Councillor Rose and Councillor Chankowski. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. And then the second recommendation is that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth amends Section 1 of Draft Bylaw 18/2022 to say that Ryan Duck be appointed to the office of a member of council for the municipality ward, for the Mitchell ward, for the Corporation of the Municipality of West Perth. And that the Municipality of West Perth gives second and third and final reading to Bylaw 18th, the 7th day of February 2022. So do we have a mover and seconder for the second and third reading? Councillor Bell and Councillor Murray. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that is carried. Okay. And again, congratulations to Ryan. We do not have a closed session, I don't believe, tonight, do we, Dan?
No, we do not have a closed session, but if council would entertain CAO's Rick's report, if you note the report noted bylaw 13, bylaw 13 was seeking council authorization to enter into the agreement, the terms of which were included in that report, whereby the purchaser needs to build a fence, and it would be for $40,000. So we have not included bylaw 13, and we were just curious if council would entertain a motion to authorize the clerk and the mayor to enter into that sales agreement. And then we'll bring that back to council at a later date.
Okay, so you need a motion that we do a bylaw for that.
I would be looking for a motion for council to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into the sales agreement.
Okay. We have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Tam, Councillor Rose. Questions? It's with Councillor Tam.
Just a question, Dan, about the timing of the closing date and the fence. Is it hand in hand, or I'm concerned about the fence, making sure that gets done in an orderly fashion.
Through you, Mayor McKenzie, I'm happy to answer that question. So the buyer has 60 days from the date of closing to register the site plan agreement requiring the fence, and then the fence will be the fence is a bound registered requirement of the site plan agreement, which can be enforced. So not only constructing it, but also keeping it there will be able to be controlled through that site plan agreement amendment.
Again, Councillor Tam.
Just further to that, Jeff. So most site plans, you have 2 years to fulfill it. Is that correct then? Before we'd see a fence?
No, we can put a date on, we could put a reasonable date in the site plan about when we want the fence constructed. So the condition was that the fence had to be constructed at the expense of the buyer. And the other condition was that they amend the site plan agreement requiring it to be kept. We could put a date on that construction in the site plan agreement.
Okay, I'd like to see that.
Yeah, we're going to treat this as an amendment, or there's actually no site plan agreement on the site, but we're not going to, and I just want to, for the purposes of being completely transparent and clear, we're not going to use this as an opportunity to try to add a site plan agreement to a site that doesn't have one. So this will be a bit of a unique site plan agreement. It will only be a site plan agreement addressing the fence. And I believe that's the fair thing to do. There's no trigger to open up a full agreement, and it would be inappropriate for us to use this process to try to get one.
Okay, any other questions on that?
So the
let's-
effective, and I just want to say, Mayor McKenzie, the effect of passing the resolution was, it will provide, Dan, and that would provide when we approve the bylaw at the end of council, you have what you need to authorize the signing.
Okay, all right. Okay, it's been duly moved and seconded. No further questions or discussion on that. So all in favor of that resolution? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Okay. All right. We do not have a closed session, so item 14 on the agenda is the confirmatory bylaw. And the recommendation is that bylaw 19 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council and the corporation of the municipality of West Perth be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed the 7th day of February. We have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Rose and a seconder, Councillor Murray. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn that the municipality of West Perth adjourn, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, Dean, have you got your hand up? Well, I think Dean is froze. I don't see Dean moving. Oh, there he goes. Did you have a question, Dean?
No, I was moving in favor of the motion.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. Yeah, there's a bit of a delay there on the internet tonight. Okay, so the last motion then is that the Council of the Municipality of West Perth adjourn council at 9:13. Mover and seconder for that, Councillor Vink. And I can take Councillor Tinkowski. I see his hands up there this time. So seconded by Councillor Tinkowski. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you. So very good. We got through a lot of stuff there tonight. I thought we'd be maybe a little later. No, that's good.